investigations at FIFA headquarters, despite Blatter not personally being named as a suspect.
I worked with Blatter for 30 years.
Yeah.
I know nothing called loyalty. Under any conditions, under any kind of tribulation, whatever, of course, a man may suffer, I know loyalty. And therefore, when I feel like he's down, or seem to be down, I won't push him down. If he means my enemy, if he's down, I give him a helping hand. But there are people in this country and outside who like to demonize people. I'm not like that.
Among others, US authorities and Swiss prosecutors have launched criminal inquiries into whether FIFA officials accepted bribes for the 2018 and 2022 World Cup hosting bids awarded to Russia and Qatar respectively. For its part, Russia's denying the allegations and says it's not worried about the scandal affecting its right to host the Cup in 2018.
In principle, we acted within regulations that existed at the time. I can assure you that if something was there, then it would have come out in the 2-3 years since. The only thing I'm worried about is wrongful accusations here.
And some inside Russia are echoing earlier statements made by President Vladimir Putin, labelling the investigations a sham and a politically motivated attack on Russia's right to host the prestigious sporting event. With allegations flying from all corners, the beautiful game has been thrust from the football field to the political arena, testing not just FIFA's 111-year history of governing football, but also relations between those who play it and host its biggest tournament.
For more on the ongoing FIFA scandal and even its geopolitical impact, we are joined in the Beijing studio by Mr. Yan Qiang, a sports commentator here with us in Beijing. And also in London, we have Mr. Mihir Bose, who is a sports editor and columnist for the London Evening Standard. And also in Oxford, we are joined by Mr. Neil Clark, journalist and broadcaster. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us for another round of this continuing saga of FIFA. First of all, Mr. Clark, what do you think about the possibility, as the Russian side has been accusing the West of meddling with FIFA's affairs, particularly Russia's possibility of hosting 2018 World Cup?
Well, I would agree with them. I think that it's very clear there's a political agenda at work here because of the call on the European Parliament, for example, last week for Sepp Blatter to resign immediately, I think was political, because he's already said, Blatter, that he's stepping down by the end of the year. So why is it so important that he goes now when no evidence has yet come against him? He hasn't been charged with anything after all. So I think this is all about trying to get rid of Sepp Blatter now, because the Western Europeans, perhaps the Americans, also want to see someone to take his place who would then remove the World Cup from Russia. So we're talking about politics here on a global scale. I think it's part of this anti-Russian campaign that we see in other aspects too.
I see. Mr. Bowles, what do you think?
I'm not sure it's a straightforward political campaign. There's certainly the fact that in the Western media and among the Western politicians, the British Parliament, for instance, for some time, British MPs for some time, has been saying that Sepp Blatter should go. This is long before he announced his intention to step down, and these MPs keep calling for that. And America now, with the American Justice Department involved, there clearly is an agenda to what they feel is a reform of FIFA. But I'm not sure it's a direct attempt to remove Blatter and take the World Cup away from Russia. In any case, I think to take the World Cup away from Russia would mean proving that Russia committed some fraud or some bribery or something wrong in getting the World Cup.
Well, before we go to Mr. Yan here in Beijing studio, let's take a look at how Russia has been preparing for the 2018 World Cup. Certainly a big thing for any country. Russia, in fact, now is upgrading a dozen of stadiums across the country for preparation of the 2018 World Cup. Let's take a look. So far, at least 40 of the $11 billion World Cup construction program, including stadiums, training facilities, transport infrastructure, and hotels, is either underway or has already been completed. Let's come back to you, Mr. Yan, because I know you just came back from Moscow.
Yes.
And we're at a conference with your Russian counterparts talking about the 2018 World Cup potential. What do you think about this ongoing saga with FIFA, particularly with Russia involved? Is it really politically targeted?
I'm not so sure, but there might be a kind of political agenda against Russia in a larger sense because of the Ukraine-Russian problem and especially the after effects of the Crimea situation. But from my observation from this conference, which was the preparation committee's annual conference for Russia 2018, I think they are already on their way for a fantastic World Cup held in Russia in the biggest geographically nation in the world. They are on the way, but they were really offended by all these doubts and the so-called conspiracies. And if there is no hard evidence against Russia, so how could you just take the rights away from Russia? And just as those bidders, like the preparation chairman Sorokin said, there was no event, no bribery in the bidding for the Russian 2018.
Well, it seems that one visit to Moscow already won your
mind.
That
was what I heard. That was what I heard.
But let me go back to you, Mr. Clark. One of the things is many wonder, has Russia been playing it out of proportion? I mean, some of the suspicions against Russia. Has Russia been playing this game on its own about suspecting others might taking the game away from Russia? Well, there's certainly no hint from FIFA at all, which is still the official body for soccer in the world, about that.
Well, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Even before these arrests took place in Switzerland a few weeks ago, we had right-wing American senators, including John McCain, was actually writing to FIFA, urging them to take the World Cup away from Russia for events as part of events in the Ukraine, which they blamed on Russia. So I think there is very clearly a political agenda here, which is quite open. You've actually got the head of the Polish FA who has called for the World Cup to be stripped from Russia. So there are heads of the FA, various FAs and politicians in Europe and the West who have openly called for it. So I don't think Russia is unfairly... I think Russia is right to worry that there is a threat. But I think it would be completely outrageous if the World Cup was taken away from Russia when we haven't seen a scrap of evidence yet that Russia has done anything wrong.
I see.
It seems to me that people who have got a clear anti-Russian agenda, before we've seen any evidence, are saying the World Cup should be withdrawn should be taken away from Russia, which I think is totally wrong.
Just to balance that, Mr. Bowes, I know you've been covering FIFA for such a long time. You're a very seasoned journalist. Do you understand and help us to understand the process, the legal process that FIFA and others need to go through before, taking away anybody's rights of hosting any year's World Cup? I mean, it has to be a very sophisticated process. It has nothing to do with what one person or two person make any kind of specific statements.
Absolutely. The only time World Cups have moved is when a country has said it couldn't host the World Cup. So, for instance, '86 went to Mexico because the country that had been selected couldn't host it. But for it to actually happen let's understand what FIFA is. FIFA is a trade organization. It has its own rules. And the World Cup is awarded, at present, in future it will be by the Congress, by the Executive Committee of FIFA. For the Executive Committee of FIFA would have to meet, and it would have to reverse its vote and say that according to evidence we have had, this World Cup was awarded to X country, and it was awarded on false basis. It violated certain rules of the competition, the bidding competition. So that's how it would have been done. Some external force can't take the World Cup away. The World Cup is not owned by the governments or anything like that. It's owned by FIFA. It's their property, and it has to be a decision within FIFA. What I think we're witnessing now is, if you like, a gathering of forces, of warlords within FIFA, now that Blatter is going. Who's going to succeed him? And that's the crucial question. If Blatter gets his own successor in, and that is very important, I think that is what Blatter is working towards, to get his own successor in. And remember, he got 133 votes 4 days before he announced that he was stepping down. So he has a lot of support within FIFA. Whether we like it or not, whether the Western media likes it or not, whether Western politicians like it or not, that's a fact in the land. That's a fact on the ground, if you like.
Right.
and
well,
that can't be got rid of.
Well,
I
think what you have just said,
that will make a big difference.
What you have just said is really important. It has not only has to do with the person who is the president of FIFA, Mr. Blatter, but also the structure of FIFA, because after all, people are talking about reforms. Mr. Yan here in Beijing, let me ask you, we recently have heard some of the German Football Association talking about the structure of FIFA has to be changed, a governing body has to be changed according to so-called the size and also the sporting relevance of soccer in countries. Of course, there are different oppositions toward that, but this is certainly a very much a warring states period of time of FIFA. What exactly is it going to lead to, and will countries have a fair say in the future of this organization?
I think that's a hot issue, according to the latter part of your question, whether all nations will have fair share, say, like, Somalia or country like USA, a huge difference contrasted in their population and political influence, but each of them would just have one vote. I'm not sure, but that's the way of international politics going. But for the first part of your question, how would FIFA restructure itself? I think in the future, FIFA has to centralize its power, because we're looking back of all those FBI arrests and all those problems that happened. It happened in those continental organizations, which are subsidiary organizations of FIFA, not from FIFA headquarters directly. We've seen so many bad examples from CONCACAF, CONMEBOL, and even
not
from
yet.
AFC.
At this moment, we don't know anything specific.
Oh, we have to take it they're innocent before they're proven guilty. I think that's the bottom line, right? So I think FIFA has to tighten its grasp on all these continental organizations. Otherwise, the problems will come out from everywhere.
Mr. Clark, what do you think? The structural reform, and what exactly, where should I say rather, is FIFA heading for as a result before the election takes place, before Mr. Blatter formally stepped down?
I think we've got two big issues here. First of all, there's the corruption issue, which is obviously a major issue. There's also the sort of interference by the Western FAs, and I think they're resentful of the fact that Sepp Blatter has actually made this a global game, a world game. He's given World Cups for the first time to Asia, to Africa. And I think we've got to think back to the history of FIFA. It began in 1904. It was very much a European elite club, 7 members, all from Europe. And I think since then, football's become a global game. And I think that whoever takes over FIFA has got to respect that. And I think there is the basic problem. We've already had talks for a few years back, actually, of a breakaway from the Western FAs from FIFA. And I think there's a resentment in the West that the World Cup doesn't go to Europe as much as it used to go to. I mean, the USA wanted to get the 2022 World Cup, and this is the basic problem. The Western countries have got to accept the fact this is a global game, and it will go to Europe less often in the future, and that's a good thing. It should go around the world. It should go to Africa more and to Asia. So I think there's, that's a crunch issue, really.
Mr. Bowles, do you believe it is more or less a north-south divide, as Mr. Clark just illustrated?
Well, yes, there is a Europe and a, if you like, non-European divide, a non-Western divide. FIFA is, as Blatter always says, bigger than the United Nations. There's one man, one vote. But you see, the reforms he's planning is very interesting. At the moment, the way FIFA was, historically FIFA was set up by the French. The British didn't want any part in it, but British came in after the Second World War. They have certain privileges. Britain, for instance, the only country with 4 nations in FIFA: England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Also, Britain has a vice president of the FIFA executive. Britain has other roles in the international body that looks at rules. What I think the reforms will do is chip away at that, and Blatter will present himself as a reformer, saying, why do we have all these antiquated rules which allow the Europeans to dominate? At the moment, the Europeans have 8 members in a 24-man executive. If that executive is slimmed down to, say, 12 or 15, then I think Europe will lose power, and that is what is likely to happen before the next president is elected.
I see. Mr. Yan, what is your take? Particularly, how do you think this FIFA, this world soccer body, an international organization, should be run, and how is that related or should not be related to this specific person's ups and downs, Mr. Sepp Blatter?
It's very difficult to describe
It is a very
what
complicated
it
question.
will be run, but I think more transparency and more self-governing, should be added to the current structure, the power structure of FIFA. Of course, FIFA is facing the same task the IOC had faced in the Salt Lake Olympics, Winter Olympics, which happened about 15 years ago. And IOC passed that very dramatic example.
Stage, rather.
Yeah, kind of a test. And I think FIFA could do that, but it might be more complicated than IOC.
What would be the roles of China, for example, of other developing countries, emerging economies, or countries that are fascinated by soccer but not necessarily a great performer so far?
Can I describe China's position now on the international political stage
go
of
ahead.
football?
Go ahead.
China's situation is now no voice, no contribution, or even not interested. Of course, it's starting to change because the deputy director of the National Sports Industry, Mr. Tsai, he voiced China's great interest in bidding or in hosting the future World Cups, but it might take years to come. We have to get involved first. So I cannot say what kind of future role China will play. We're not getting qualified for World Cup finals anytime soon, but we have to be there.
Okay, my final question also for Mr. Bowes. We understand 2026, the bidding process has already been postponed. Should scandals like this postpone other practices and operations of FIFA, which after all is a body that's governing world soccer, and soccer, as we all know, is important for so many around the world. It's not just a sport, it's many things in people's heart. Mr. Bowes.
Well, first of all, you can't have the bidding process at the moment, given the state of FIFA. That has to be worked out. And remember, the next bidding process will be decided not by the executive, it will be decided by the FIFA Congress. So we have all sorts of factors there.
Right.
And you raised the question earlier of China. Well, China, I'm told, or the Chinese claim, the Chinese, that you all invented soccer. So why don't you try and come into the world game? Britain says they invented football, which they did, and Britain has a big role. What the Chinese president should announce, in my opinion, tomorrow morning is we invented soccer, we are going to run the world game and help run them in the Confucian spirit.
That's a great point.
Well, Mr. Bowes, as you may know, this is an equal world we're talking about. Everybody have a say, no matter you invented it or not invented it. But it's an interesting question. Mr. Yan just said there's some gradual changes going on from the Chinese attitude. We're looking forward to more. Soccer is not just about soccer. It's about so many things. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for the three of you, for your input.